The battle at Corveth Ridge was chaos incarnate. Coalition forces holding defensive positions against a massive enemy assault, explosions tearing through fortifications, casualties mounting on both sides with brutal efficiency. Human combat medic Corporal Jake Morrison moved through the carnage with focused intensity, his training overriding the instinctive terror that came with working under fire. Wounded soldiers needed immediate care, and thinking about the dangers meant people died while you hesitated. He saw a Kyrathi warrior go down hard about 15 meters from his position, shrapnel from an explosion, blood spreading rapidly across her torso where her combat armor had failed. She was trying to reach cover but collapsing from blood loss. Jake ran to her position in a crouch, incoming fire forcing him to stay low. He dropped beside her, his hands already moving to assess injuries before his conscious mind finished processing the situation. "I've got you," Jake said, his voice carrying the calm authority medics learn to project during crisis. "Stay still. Let me work." The warrior's violet eyes focused on him, with intensity that suggested she was fighting to maintain consciousness. She tried to speak, but Jake interrupted. "Don't talk. Breathing's more important right now. Just stay with me." Her armor had taken multiple hits, chest plate compromised, underlying biomesh torn, blood flowing from lacerations that had severed something important. Jake worked with practiced efficiency. Pressure seals on the worst wounds, emergency coagulants injected directly into damaged tissue, stabilization of her vitals while explosions continued around them. Another medic might have moved on once she was stable enough for transport, but Jake noticed her armor's damage patterns suggested she'd taken hits protecting someone else. Deliberate positioning rather than accidental exposure. That kind of courage deserved more than minimal intervention. He stayed with her, maintaining direct pressure on wounds his seals hadn't fully controlled, monitoring her breathing, speaking calmly to keep her focused. "You're going to be fine. I've seen way worse than this. Just keep breathing and stay conscious if you can." When coalition forces finally pushed back the enemy assault and immediate combat ended, evacuation teams arrived to transport casualties. Jake helped load the Kyrathi warrior he'd been treating, ensuring the transport medics understood her specific injuries and the stabilization he'd already provided. "Good work, Morrison," one of the transport medics said, examining the warrior's wounds. "You saved this one for sure. She was minutes from bleeding out when you reached her." Jake nodded and immediately moved toward the next casualty requiring attention. There were dozens more wounded who needed help, and dwelling on any single patient meant others might die while he stood still. The battle's aftermath consumed the next 12 hours, treating wounded, coordinating evacuations, helping restore defensive positions. By the time Jake finally collapsed in a rest area, he barely remembered individual patients from the chaos. Just fragments, wounds sealed, lives saved, the desperate focus of combat medicine where every second mattered. It wasn't until 18 hours after the battle, when casualty reports were being compiled, and Jake was finally getting actual sleep, that his commanding officer woke him with unusual urgency. "Morrison, I need you awake. Now, there's a situation you need to understand." Jake sat up, his combat-trained reflexes bringing him to alertness despite exhaustion. "Sir, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly," the officer said, his expression carrying something between awe and concern. "But I need to ask you about a Kyrathi warrior you treated during the battle. Female, severe shrapnel wounds to the torso. You stayed with her for extended period providing direct care." "I remember her," Jake confirmed. "Multiple lacerations, compromised chest armor, stabilized her and got her to evac. She survived." "She survived because of your immediate intervention," the officer said. "But there's something you need to know about her identity. The warrior you saved was Queen Veka Thulsira of the Kyrathi Empire." Jake stared at his commanding officer, his exhausted brain struggling to process this information. The Queen. but she was in standard combat armor on the front lines. Karathi royalty fight alongside their warriors during major conflicts, the officer explained. It's fundamental to their culture. Leaders prove worthiness through personal courage in battle. She commands from the front, not from safe distance. But she's still the queen, and you just saved her life without knowing who she was. The officer continued. She's asking to see you. Formally. The entire Karathi command structure is treating this as a significant incident with cultural implications we're still trying to fully understand. Jake tried to process what this meant. Am I in trouble? Should I have recognized her rank? I didn't see any insignia that indicated. You're not in trouble, the officer interrupted, but you need to understand. You treated the Karathi queen exactly like any other wounded soldier. Apparently that means something profound to them. You'll need to meet with her and their diplomatic corps. Just be respectful and honest about what you did and why. When Jake was brought to the medical facility where Queen Veka was recovering, he expected elaborate protocol and careful diplomatic language. What he encountered was Veka looking at him, with expression carrying raw emotion beneath her composed exterior. You are the medic who saved my life, Veka said, not a question, a statement carrying weight. I'm Corporal Jake Morrison, Your Majesty. I treated your injuries during the battle at Corveth Ridge. I'm glad you're recovering well. Veka studied him with intensity that made Jake feel like she was seeing through to his core. You ran through active fire to reach me when I was bleeding. You spoke to me with calm authority, telling me I would be fine, that you'd seen worse. You stayed with me when you could have moved to other casualties, maintaining pressure on wounds that your SEALs hadn't fully controlled. She paused. Did you know who I was? No, Your Majesty. I saw a wounded warrior who needed immediate medical intervention. Your armor didn't display rank insignia that I recognized, and in combat situations, I prioritize medical need over identifying specific individuals. You treated me as just another wounded soldier, Veka said quietly. Not as queen, not as someone whose life carries political significance, just as another life worth saving with the same urgency and skill you'd show anyone. Veka looked at Jake directly, her voice carrying profound emotion. Do you understand how rare that is? How significant? I am queen. Every interaction I have is filtered through awareness of my rank, my power, my political importance. People treat me differently because of who I am, even in crisis situations where such considerations should be irrelevant. She gestured to her bandaged wounds. But you knelt beside me on that battlefield and simply worked to save my life because I was bleeding and you had skills to help. You didn't know I was queen, so you gave me something I rarely experience. Treatment based purely on my humanity, or our equivalent, rather than on political calculations about what saving me might mean. That was just my job, Your Majesty. I'm a combat medic. I help wounded people regardless of who they are. That dedication, that refusal to differentiate based on rank or political significance, is exactly what makes your actions so profound, Veka responded. My physicians say I would have died without your immediate intervention. The shrapnel had severed an artery that was bleeding internally. You identified and sealed it before I lost enough blood to make survival impossible. She paused. Among my people, when someone saves the monarch's life through genuine compassion rather than calculated duty, it creates Kathara Velshara, the sacred bond of battlefield mercy. You demonstrated ultimate trustworthiness, the willingness to prioritize life over politics, to see the person rather than the crown, to act from genuine dedication rather than strategic calculation. Over the following days, as Veka recovered, and the political implications were processed by both coalition and Karathi leadership, Jake discovered what his simple act of combat medicine had created. The Kathara Velshara bound him to Queen Veka and the Karathi Empire through recognition that he demonstrated character transcending normal military duty. He'd saved her life without knowing who she was, without calculating advantage, purely from medical dedication and compassionate instinct. You are bound to me now through laws and customs older than our current civilization, Veka explained during a private audience. Not through formal obligation or political arrangement, but through recognition that you demonstrated character worth honoring. You saved my life without knowing I was queen, without considering what such action might gain you, purely from dedication to your calling and genuine compassion for a dying warrior. I was doing my job, Jake protested. You were demonstrating character most people only claim to possess, Veka corrected. You risked your life running through active fire to reach me. You stayed beside me providing direct care when moving to safer positions would have been more logical. You treated my wounds with urgent skill, not because you knew I was queen, but because you saw a life worth saving. When the immediate crisis passed and formal recognition ceremonies were held, Veka made public declaration that carried significant political weight. Corporal Jake Morrison saved my life on the battlefield at Corveth Ridge. He did this without knowing I was queen, without calculating political advantage, without expectation of reward. He simply saw a wounded warrior and provided the same urgent, skilled care he gives to all who need his help. That character, that dedication to preserving life regardless of rank or politics, created sacred bond recognized by our oldest laws. She looked at Jake directly before the assembled coalition and Karathi leadership. By the authority of Kethara Velshara, and by my personal recognition of demonstrated worth, I acknowledge Jake Morrison as one who has proven absolute trustworthiness through action rather than words. He is bound to our people not through political arrangement, but through sacred recognition that he values life over calculation, compassion over convenience. Some bonds are formed through political alliance and strategic calculation, some through shared experiences and formal arrangements, and some are created on battlefields when a medic runs through fire to save a dying warrior, demonstrating through urgent, skilled care that every life matters equally regardless of crowns or politics, proving that genuine compassion shown without awareness of consequence creates recognition that conscious strategy can never replicate. The medic who stopped a warrior's bleeding discovered that treating everyone with the same dedicated urgency, seeing lives to save rather than political calculations to manage, can create bonds that reshape relationships between species. Because mercy shown on battlefields without expectation of recognition demonstrates character worth honoring above all formal achievements.